the most powerful empire on earth, made one catastrophic mistake. They looked at Europe and laughed, dismissed them as barbarians, refused to even consider they could be a threat. That single decision would destroy them, cost them a century of humiliation. And why China never forgot what happened next. Picture this: 1793. British diplomat just finished a journey of thousands of miles. Intricate clocks that track time across multiple cities. Scientific instruments representing decades of European innovation. He's ready to negotiate. Ready to establish trade. Ready to forge a partnership between two great powers. The Chinese emperor looks at him. For both nations. For the entire world. But to understand why China rejected Europe so completely, we need to go deeper, and everyone else. For over 2,000 years, China operated under something called the Tributary system. This wasn't just politics. This was a complete worldview, a way of understanding how the entire universe worked. At the absolute center of everything sat the Chinese emperor, not just a king. The son of heaven, chosen by cosmic forces to rule the Middle Kingdom. And Middle Kingdom wasn't just a name, it was a statement. China believed they literally sat at the moral and cultural center of the world. Everyone else existed on the edge. The farther you lived from China, the less civilized you were. Sounds arrogant, right? Here's the thing. For most of human history, they were actually right. China invented paper while Europeans were still using stone tablets. Their cities were massive. Their culture sophisticated beyond anything Europe could match. By 1820, China produced nearly 1/3 of the entire world's economic output, 1/3 from a single empire. So, when China looked at the rest of the world and saw themselves as superior, they weren't delusional. They were stating observable fact. The tributary system reflected this reality perfectly. Want to trade with China? Fine. But you play by their rules. Foreign rulers had to send envoys bearing gifts to you, the emperor. These envoys would perform a ritual so degrading, it's hard to imagine today. You kneel 3 times. Each time, you bow so low, your forehead literally touches the ground. 9 times total, you're prostrating yourself, acknowledging that this emperor is above you in every possible way. In return, the emperor gives you gifts back, usually worth more than what you brought, and grants you permission to trade. But make no mistake, this isn't trade between equals. You're acknowledging inferiority, you're seeking favor from a superior power. Countries like Korea, Vietnam, dozens of smaller kingdoms, they all participated in this system for centuries. It brought stability. It allowed commerce. Most importantly, it reinforced the fundamental truth of the Chinese worldview. China is the center. Everyone else revolves around them like planets around the sun. This belief was so deeply embedded in Chinese culture that by the time Europeans arrived in the 1500s and 1600s, China couldn't even imagine any alternative. The idea that some distant island nation could be an equal. Impossible. The idea that these pale foreigners might have technology or knowledge China needed. Laughable. This worldview worked perfectly for 2,000 years. Until it didn't. King George III of Britain has a problem. Britain is buying massive amounts of Chinese goods, tea, silk, porcelain. British aristocrats can't get enough. But China doesn't want anything. Britain sells nothing. The trade is completely one-sided. Britain is hemorrhaging silver just to pay for Chinese products. Their economy is bleeding out. So King George sends Lord Macartney on a mission. Clear objectives. Open more Chinese ports to British trade. Establish a permanent British embassy in Beijing. Reduce restrictions. Basically, get China to treat Britain like an equal trading partner instead of some insignificant tributary state. Macartney brings 600 packages of gifts, scientific instruments, advanced weapons, artwork. He needs 90 wagons, 40 carts, 200 horses, and 3,000 porters just to transport everything. He sails on a warship with nearly 100 people in his crew. This isn't a small gesture. Britain is showing off everything they have. Their best technology, their finest craftsmanship, their cutting-edge innovation. Surely China will be impressed. From the moment Macartney arrives, everything goes wrong. Chinese officials keep calling his gifts tribute. Macartney keeps insisting they're gifts between equals. Then comes the real fight. The Kowtow. Chinese officials demand Macartney perform the full humiliating ritual before the emperor. Macartney refuses. He offers to bow on one knee, the same way he'd bow before his own king, but he won't prostrate himself. To the Chinese, this is insulting. To Macartney, performing the Kowtow would be admitting Britain is inferior. They eventually reach some kind of compromise. Historians still debate exactly what Macartney did, but he gets his audience with Emperor Qianlong. And this is where it all falls apart. The emperor and his officials look at all the British gifts, the planetariums, the telescopes, the advanced machinery representing decades of European scientific progress, and they're completely unimpressed. One Chinese official literally says, "The British like to show off their ingenuity." The emperor's response to King George's requests, basically, "Thanks, but no thanks." He writes a letter explaining that China has everything it needs. It doesn't require anything from the outside world. More ports? No. Embassies? Absolutely not. Foreign ambassadors living permanently in Beijing? Impossible. Their language and customs are too different, they wouldn't fit in. The message is crystal clear. China sees Britain as just another minor kingdom seeking favor. Equal diplomatic relations, not even, on the table. And here's what makes this moment so tragic. While China was dismissing British technology as toys, Europe was in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. 1793, the exact year of Macartney's mission. British factories were beginning to transform human civilization. Steam engines powering textile mills, iron production skyrocketing, new technologies making British ships faster, stronger, deadlier. Britain was building an industrial war machine that would dominate the planet within decades. China missed all of it. But here's the question. Why? Why did the most advanced civilization on Earth miss the most important technological shift in human history? Because their entire worldview told them they were already at the peak. They had been the most advanced culture for so long they couldn't imagine someone overtaking them. They measured greatness by philosophy, art, social harmony, areas where they genuinely did excel. They didn't focus on industrial production or military technology the way Europe was. There's also a practical reason. China didn't need an industrial revolution. They had massive amounts of cheap labor. European countries had labor shortages and high wages, which forced them to invent machines replacing workers. China didn't have that pressure. Their traditional methods worked fine, but this created a catastrophic blind spot. While China stayed comfortable, Europe was racing ahead, and China didn't just miss the revolution. They actively rejected it. They saw European ways as barbaric, uncivilized. Beneath them, some historians argue, this was rational. The tributary system had worked perfectly for centuries. Why change what works? Others say it was textbook pride before a fall. China was so convinced of their superiority they couldn't see the threat standing right in front of them. China's rejection of Europe didn't make the problem disappear. It made it catastrophically worse. By the 1830s, Britain found something China would buy: opium. British merchants started flooding China with the drug, grown in India, shipped to Chinese ports. Millions became addicted. And when China tried to stop it, Britain went to war. The Opium Wars destroyed China's image of themselves. The empire that dismissed Europe as barbarians got crushed by those same barbarians. What followed was a century of humiliation. Foreign powers carved up China like a cake. The greatest civilization on Earth became a victim. And it all started because China looked at Europe in 1793 and laughed. The dragon dismissed the threat and paid the ultimate price. If this story showed you how arrogance can destroy even the greatest empires, hit that like button and subscribe to Axis Lens. We reveal the untold stories that explain how power really works. Want to know what happened during the Opium Wars that destroyed China? That video is waiting for you next. Don't miss it.